Grain Elevator and Processing Society is hosting their annual GEAPS Exchange Conference at the Kansas City Convention Center, February 22nd through the 25th of 2025. GEAPS Exchange is the biggest and best show in the grain industry with more than 400 exhibitors and 45 hours of education. It is the best place to find grain handling and processing operation solutions all in one place. GEAPS Exchange brings together industry professionals from across the world to help build professional networks and connect with the products you need. Come walk the trade show floor, take part in live demonstrations, innovation stations, and see new equipment. Make valuable connections through a variety of fun and exciting social events. Early bird pricing ends January 28th. Learn more and register at jeeps.com/exchange. Tune in to this extraordinary episode of Collaborating for Safety between First Responders and Grain Facilities, where safety takes center stage and lives are safeguarded through the power of collaboration. Imagine being a new employee at a grain facility. Partaking in these collaborative efforts with first responders, it's not just a learning experience, it's a testament to an organization that genuinely values its employees, their well-being, and a safety culture that goes above and beyond. Our guest today has the experience of creating partnerships between first responders and grain facilities. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jim Lenz, your host of Whole Grain and the Director of Global Training and Education at GEAPS, where the mission of the Grain Elevator and Processing Society is to champion, connect, and serve the global grain industry and our members. At GEAPS, we work to be the global community and thought leader for the grain industry, which feeds and fuels the world. Thanks for listening today and for joining the network of thousands of other grain handling and processing professionals across the globe, taking strategic steps to grow professionally. The Whole Grain Show will give you the competitive advantage to win at work so you can make more of an impact. In this episode of Whole Grain, we're joined by Dean Alling. Dean serves as the Director of Safety for Ray-Carroll County Grain Growers, Incorporated. As a full-service cooperative based out of the United States in the state of Missouri, Ray-Carroll County Grain Growers, Incorporated provides the services and technical expertise to help their local producers thrive. They've been very proud to serve their member owners since 1931. Our guest today, Dean Alling, is a seasoned industry expert who has experienced firsthand the power of these collaborations. Dean sheds light on the industry's pulse, sharing his thoughts and experiences on the topic that lies at the heart of the grain elevator world: safety. We uncover the critical components to effective emergency response preparedness as we explore the best practices for both first responders and the grain facility employees. Dean provides practical insights and shares real-life success stories demonstrating the power of collaboration in mitigating emergencies with grain facilities. As we journey through this episode, we'll uncover the ever-evolving landscape of emergency response procedures and technology. Dean explains how these advancements have revolutionized the way grain facilities and first responders work together, adapting to new challenges and optimizing safety measures. For grain facility managers seeking to enhance their emergency response procedures and fostering stronger collaboration with first responders, Dean shares exclusive tips and advice garnered from his vast experience. Don't miss out on this golden opportunity to elevate safety protocols within your organization. We also address the unique challenges that first responders may encounter in emergency situations within grain facilities. Dean offers invaluable strategies to overcome these obstacles, ensuring a seamless and effective response when every second counts. And finally, we delve into the feedback from first responders who have had the privilege of visiting grain facilities. Dean's insights reveal the profound impact these collaborations have on cultivating a culture of safety and support, leaving a lasting impression on grain facility employees, first responders, and conveying a clear message of care and preparedness. All that and more coming up next. Today we welcome welcome Dean Alling, an experienced safety manager and director with a demonstrated history of working in the food production industry. He's skilled in grain and industrial safety with an emphasis in fall protection, confined space rescue, safety culture, and policy implementation. He serves as the director of safety for Ray-Carroll County Grain Growers, Incorporated. Dean, welcome, and thanks for your participation in Whole Grain.
Pleasure to be here.
To allow our listeners to get to know you and start the show with a bit of positive spirit, could you share with me and our listeners a mantra that you might have or a success quote that you live by professionally?
Sure. I try to choose something every year. This year, the thing I'm going by is keep the main thing the main thing. I, a lot of times, get sidetracked and go down rabbit trails. And so it's just something for me this year to keep the main thing the main thing.
I like that. Stay focused. I've heard that before, and it's a good one. Now, to provide some context for our whole grain listeners who are joining us today from all around the world, could you provide a brief overview of your role of Director of Safety and about your organization, the Ray-Carroll County Growers, Incorporated? How do they play a role in the grain industry? What kind of grain commodities are you handling and processing? I'm sure people are curious about that too.
Sure. So we operate out of 15 locations, all in Missouri. We're a full-service co-op. We handle our owners, the farmers, their grain, fertilizer, chemical, fuel, and seed needs. And as far as what kind of grain, we handle corn, wheat, and soybean mostly.
Great. Now, this is really an important topic that we're going to discuss today, but we are just coming off of GEAPS Exchange and at the time of this recording, and you've had time to reflect on that. You were there. What did you think of GEAPS 2023? And for those listeners who have never attended GEAPS Exchange, what kind of impact can GEAPS Exchange have on an individual and an organization?
I loved GEAPS Exchange. Our world is changing, and it seems like GEAPS is changing with it. The training sessions I felt were very valuable. I still love to walk the booths and connect to our contractors and vendors and also meet new ones. Exchange is an awesome opportunity for people to get to and get to know the contractors that are out there, as well as other people in the industry.
Yeah, I think you're right. Exchange is a great opportunity to connect, get some good training development on topics that are relevant to you and future projects coming up. And of course, those vendors and suppliers that support facilities, you can't have a better opportunity than then to have those great conversations and continue to develop those relationships. Today, our discussion centers around the collaboration between grain facilities and first responders to best support each other. As I say that, one of the first questions that comes to mind is this really commonplace for grain elevators, for first responders? Are they seeking each other out? What are your general feelings surrounding this? Have you had any recent conversations in the industry about this?
This is something that's becoming more and more important as people are talking about it. I think the old school methods really didn't rely on that. But I think also as we are starting to see more and more of our employees be members of volunteer fire departments, that's cropped up as well. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of instances where bad connections, bad communication between the departments, first responders, and the facilities has turned into pretty bad situations. It's turning the tide. People are starting to look at these people. We're all on the same team. We're not against each other. And so the need is even more evident today.
Yeah, I think a great introductory response. Some organizations are doing it, but there's the need and interest, I think, that is growing. So let's kind of work ourselves into the weeds here, a little bit of that conversation. And I think understanding the why is important. I think grain professionals have a general understanding of why it's important, but you've actually executed discussions and held safety sessions with first responders. You've actually invited them to your site. Through this process, I would imagine that you learned so much as a result. With your willingness to share insights with whole grain listeners, it's an opportunity to really advance the grain handling and processing industry. That's why this episode is so important. Given your experience, you're able to express the depth and detail behind the why. I think you can add a lot to this conversation. Why do you believe it is important for grain facilities to invite first responders to their facility?
Bottom line, we have to be prepared. And so facilitating a first responder visit works both sides. It improves communication. For first responders, it gives them a chance to see what hurdles they might be facing when they meet an emergency. It also makes them understand the hazards on that site. It strengthens our community bonds. On the company side, it allows for gaps to be identified and addressed. Can't tell you the number of times that when we've done one of these, we've realized there was a need that the first responders needed that we weren't aware of. But then also it helps us keep us on our toes for emergency preparedness and allows us to be a partner with our community and its responders.
That's a set of interesting statements right there. I'm curious, how can first responders best prepare for responding to an emergency at a grain facility?
Sure. So they need to know what they're getting into. Information on the facility, information of risks at that facility, how are people communicating, locations, all that kind of stuff. When a first responder rolls up on your facility, they're trying to meet a need and they're trying to get through that need as fast as possible. And if they're not knowing what tools they need to be and if they're going to have to carry tools up in a single man lift to the top and there's not enough room for the responder and their equipment, all that stuff takes time and just slows down their response time to that need. So it's really important to introduce them to your facility into those situations.
We'll be back after a quick break.
GEAPS Training and Education Program is proud to release Introduction to Grain Operations. This new course is a multimedia version of what was known as GEAPS 500 with dynamic graphics, video examples, photographs, multidimensional illustrations, animations, and interactive exercises. This course is sure to prepare your teams for the work you need them to do. This is a great industry primer at a great price. For a limited time, GEAPS members may purchase the course for just $195. Non-members still save and pay just $295. For more information, visit GEAPS.com. Can you share any examples of successful responses to emergencies in grain facilities that involve collaboration between the facility and the first responders, whether it happened at your organization or maybe anecdotally somewhere else in the industry?
Unfortunately, I have a lot more examples of unsuccessful responses where I've seen facilities that have not taken advantage of that and not communicated those needs. But I did get an example of that did happen is we called 911 and the fire department was coming. The manager had someone meet them at the road and then drove in their pickup, kind of led them to the area they need to. When the fire department showed up to that area, they had all the tools that they needed, even if they didn't need it, fall protection equipment, all that stuff. They had gathered all the hoses in the whole facility already sitting there waiting on them. So all they had to do is just show up and choose what those tools they were going to use. And of course, they were ready to help and when and if they were needed there. And so it's just a great example of a manager that had talked team. Obviously, this was something that, in the spur of the moment, they just relied on that emergency plan and they rolled that plan out. And the fire department knew what they were going to do and they had already seen the facility. They knew what they needed there. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine so many situations they come to a site and they have not been there before. You can just imagine the challenges that exist. So doing work in preparation for that is such an important feat. Can you share any examples of what types of training should grain facility employees receive to best prepare for emergencies?
So bottom line is repeated drills and training. You've just got to repeat those drills. You got to repeat that training. You got to repeat it enough till it becomes muscle memory. What this allows us to do is to step in that emergency without panic, without the pause or the freeze. It reduces the shock and allows us to be quicker in action to take care of those things. If we are trying to figure out where things are because we've never talked about it, trying to figure out who's going to do what, we don't know how to call 911. We know how to do it, but who's supposed to call 911? Who else are we supposed to call? All those things that they create this stunning effect and this deer in the headlights. And we all stand around trying to figure out what needs to happen. No one's driving an action. And so as we do those drills and that training, we talk about this over and over and over again. These people have that muscle memory and they just step into that action.
Very important for sure. Now, when you think about infrastructure grain facilities across the world, they vary. Obviously started with wooden structures, concrete, still very effective. They have a long life, maybe not as adaptable. And these original concrete structures may not have necessary safety anchors and things like for a grain bin rescue and for other things and access and that. And then there's steel bin structures of storage that have continued to evolve and develop and become very popular. They're more adaptable. And oftentimes, things may be built in to help in terms of rescue. And then there's many other structures that are there. And then think of all the technologies that exist and how they're continuing to grow. We see this from the great vendors in the industry are really pushing things forward. But in general, what are the benefits of having a modern training facility for the grain industry? And as follow-up questions, how does a modern training facility impact the safety of workers in the industry? And how does a modern training facility impact the bottom line for companies in the grain industry?
I think to your point originally is our facilities are totally different. We've allowed for GEAPS to be placed in our facilities so it's not total loss, where we can contain explosion. On top of that, we've created dust collection systems. We've added a lot with that and fans and aeration. There's a lot of training to go about that's out there now that wasn't there in the past. And technology with HAZ monitoring system where we can tell a bearing on our phone and we can get an alert, an email alert or a text alert saying that we have something out of a line. All these things help us be better prepared for this. But as far as a modern training facility, resources are not cheap. Claims and litigation after an incident, though, are catastrophic. Any method a tool or a company can use in training their people and training first responders is invaluable. Sometimes pooling resources together, co-ops and co-ops or other businesses, working with universities on their training facilities, doing that stuff. But anything we have that's invaluable, getting our people in front of that. Too often, I myself have rigged up simulations trying to achieve some level of reality that just falls flat. Much better to have experts construct a training facility and coordinate that training that goes along with it.
How have emergency response procedures and technology changed in recent years, and how has it impacted the way that grain facilities and first responders work together?
We have a lot more data now. The data that's out there and accessible to everybody, and that's changing every day. We get more and more information. The ability to train employees electronically across multiple locations allows for a deeper saturation of training. The level of training is so much more relatable and reliable. I remember doing lockout, tagout training, and we're doing this generic that could work for a hot dog factory or it could work for a grain facility or a car factory and everything else. But now we have access to trainings that's pertinent to what our employees are looking at. They recognize the elevator leg. They understand housekeeping in a grain elevator. They talk about lockout, tagout with fans and distributors and belts and so all this is a lot more data that we can put in front of them that allows them to see how this relates to their job. Utilizing training resources out there. The resources available are easily accessible. I even look at GEAPS, insurance companies. All of them have resources that were not there 20 years ago. You had a guy that's been out there and he walked around with a handout and did that kind of stuff so many years ago. And now we have so much to go through. It just adds to a more informed employee aware of the hazards that they encounter. Now,
we already know that if first responders are coming to a grain facility for the first time, it's an emergency. That itself is an obstacle. But let's talk further because our audience, maybe a good chunk of them have not gone through this process. And this episode will instill those conversations at the facility and they'll schedule something. But in general, they may be wondering, what are particular challenges or obstacles that first responders might face when responding to an emergency at a grain facility, and how can these be overcome?
I guess there would be three different situations that I'd like to highlight. So the first is simply a lack of preparation. They roll up, they need information and most times assistance. And if they're sitting around looking at staff that's, hey, look, this is your job, not mine, or they're scared or they're frightful and they're not willing to help out, lack of planning, a lot of times leaves teams unprepared and struggle to assist. The second is simply an issue of a lack of water. The days of having a water pipe in the center of your elevator because we're going away from these concrete houses. So now we have to how can I get water to the top of that building? And I don't have a ladder in this rural area that could reach to the top of your facility. So they're looking at ways of doing that. And a lot of times when we have a first responder event where they come out to our facility in a non-emergency and they're just walking that's what we find out. So how can we put a water pipe up there? Because to put a water hose up there takes time. And a lot of times you don't have 175 feet of water hose somewhere that you can just hook together. And even at that's not going to give the pressure that those firefighters need. And so just a lack of water, they don't have a way of getting the water up to the top. And lastly, the third thing is just a lack of tools. They don't have the tools to do it. I'm truly amazed that even today, we have fire departments that do not have a cofferdam. They have no way of rescuing somebody in a bin engulfment. They might have talked about it. They might have done some training, but it is still not out there that we have these at every one of our fire departments. And that might be because of the cost. The cost is pretty high for a local fire department. They're trying to get other equipment and there are other things. And there's things they have to update on. On our most recent one, they did not have cofferdams and they did not have any formalized training on how to get someone out of an engulfment situation. And so talking with them and finding those things out, I've realized that, hey, look, we've got to do a better job of helping get those resources to them, whatever that means.
That is so important. Those are three things that are going to be huge takeaways from this conversation. And you are one who's gone through that. So you're sharing your expertise and your knowledge with others. So it's greatly appreciated. Just a couple of concluding questions here. I'm curious, what has the feedback been like from first responders after they conclude a visit to your site, to your facility?
I guess the first thing is they're grateful. After they come and they see that, and, food is always a good way to get them to be there. Mm-hmm. So, they've ate a little bit, they feel a little appreciated. We go up to the top. Everybody wants to go to the top of an elevator and take their pictures and everything else. But they're just amazed that someone wants to partner with them, to feel that sense of a community. And like I stated at first, we've got several employees that are members of that. And so those employees they're thrilled that management wants to make it easier on their own department. So it goes a long way to build bridges and allow them to do that. And they're just very grateful that somebody's starting to do that.
So employees are excited. Those first responders are excited. I mean, isn't it really a training opportunity for first responders that's unique but valuable that they need to prepare for?
Absolutely.
I'm curious also because trying to think like others who are listening to the show, what would a day look like for them to come to your site, if you don't mind? I mean, what is the general time frame that you've had them come there? Do you plan to have them again, but in a single setting? What's the duration of time? It says you feed them lunch. That's pretty nice to do. But what does that look like? Where are you walking? Like, could you walk me through, briefly what that kind of day would look like?
Sure. So find out what kind of fire department you have. If it's volunteer, a lot of times those volunteer departments are doing a once a month or twice a month meeting, usually after hours. And so you've got to be able to be flexible in that. If they're paid people, they might want to do both shifts. They might have shift people that come at nighttime and during the daytime. So you got to be looking at that. So look at that. But also when you're thinking about this, don't neglect EMS as well. So don't just reach out to the fire department, but get EMS. You can contact your sheriff's department, local PD as well. But, it's really nice to have a first responders day, type of thing. But, look at what's available out there, what your first responders look like, and try to plan around that. When they get there, it's very important to kind of give them a layout of the land. Where would truck traffic be? Where's your people going to be? Where do you have chemicals or fertilizer stored? Where's your hazardous chemicals at? Propane, trying to figure out all those hazards so they know that. Here in Missouri, we actually do a risk management profile. We're required to do that. And so they have that filed at their local. Back in Texas, we did not do that. And so this is one of the things that allowing them to see where those hazards are. And then simply what I try to do is I try to take them where they would have to respond. So where a person is at or where a fire might be at. So if we had an explosion that caused a fire inside of a leg, so they might want to look in the sub basement, or they want to maybe look in your boot pit. They might want to walk up on your rooftop, on your bin deck floor. And you're looking for, okay, so how would I access this? Is it a man lift that gets me up there? Do I have to climb ladders? How would I get in the actual location where the fire might be at? So showing them those locations as well. And then I always either start it off, depending on what we do, either start it off with a meal or end it with a meal. Just some way of saying I appreciate it. And then just clearly giving them contact information, hours of operation, what we're doing. Really important to tell them about like what we handle, what we do, and just a way of saying thank you. Lastly, here's a tip. Like you mentioned, Jim, firefighters are always looking for ways to train. Police department, fire department as well. So you have a unique facility that they might not have access to. Ways that they could actually use your facility to create training scenarios where they could put their department through that. So offer that up. Once again, strengthening those bonds, making sure they understand you want to partner with them to keep your guys and them.
So, Dean, you just provided well over a dozen tips for somebody who has not ever gone through that, and then kind of review if they have. So that's absolutely fantastic. So thank you for sharing that. And I just kind of want to go back to the employees of the facility and the message that it sends. I would imagine that if I'm a new employee to the facility and I took part in this collaboration with first responders, this would be not only a meaningful learning experience, but it also sends a clear message. My organization cares about me. And not only that, but they care about my coworkers. It's about a safety culture. It's not about the safety director or safety manager focused on safety all the time. Everybody in the organization. And then it's a community, right? With first responders and others. So that's fantastic. So it supports a safety culture and it takes it to the next level of being prepared. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it just backs up the message that proves that you mean what you say. You're going to put some beef behind it, right? Safety's got to be more than a poster or a slogan. And so this shows your guys that, hey, look, we're going to be a part of a response for this, and we want everybody to go home safely today. So
fantastic. Now, Dean, we are so happy to have you as a GEAPS member. You've been a real leader in the grain industry for a number of years, and GEAPS members can learn from each other. As I would imagine, for me personally, everybody I meet is an opportunity to learn something. And it seems like you feel that same way, and others will feel that same way about you. So appreciate your time sharing your thoughts and experience, because you can help to save lives by this message alone. But you're a GEAPS member and they support each other, as I said. And with that being said, I'd like to start a sentence, and I'd love for you to end or to conclude that sentence. Being part of the GEAPS family means, what does it mean to you? Being part of the GEAPS family means?
I guess it means providing a resource and a platform to help my teammates get home safely. It's a great resource, and I've been very blessed by it. I think it's also a platform that we can use to help get all of my employees home safely. But I'll add on it, like a treadmill in your spare bedroom. It's a great tool, but only if you use it.
That is exactly right. That's a good thought and good analogy to end this. Dean Alling, thank you for serving as a guest on Whole Grain. It's been an honor and a pleasure to connect with you. I know we did that early on when I first started about a year ago, and it's a pleasure then. It is a pleasure now. Thank you for spending time with Whole Grain listeners.
Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great day.
We thank Dean Alling for serving as guest in today's episode of Whole Grain. The insights Dean offered have lasting impact and save lives. This episode was also about strengthening your company's culture. We hope this episode supports your internal discussions and strengthens your relationship with first responders. We also dedicate this episode of Whole Grain to all first responders for the critical role they play in our lives. This episode, like all of our other episodes of Whole Grain, are super easy to share with others. The Whole Grain Podcast can be found in your favorite podcast apps such as Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and more. Just do a search for Whole Grain. You'll easily find it. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That way, every episode will be downloaded to your device as soon as it is released. And you can quickly catch up on past episodes as well. Additionally, you can also connect with the Whole Grain Show on the GEAPS website through GEAPS.com/wholegrain. GEAPS.com/wholegrain. Access the audio player, review the show notes and links, and access the transcript if you wish. We already have listeners from 39 countries at the time of this recording. If you find value in the show, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment. That really supports what we do and helps people discover the show from around the world much more easily. We thank you for doing that. The Whole Grain Show is a production of GEAPS, the Grain Elevator and Processing Society. The Grain Elevator and Processing Society is the largest organization in the world dedicated to advancing the grain handling and processing industry. Be sure to check out GEAPS.com. If you and your organization want to sponsor an episode and be a featured guest on the Whole Grain Show, or if you are interested in us producing audio ads to support your product or service, we can help with that. Please reach out to me, Jim Lenz, Director of Global Training and Education. My email is james@geaps.com, JAMES@GEAPS.com. Have yourself a great day, and thanks for listening to Whole Grain.